Imagine a world where maps weren't just about finding your way to the nearest coffee shop, but were full of mysteries, myths, and a touch of madness. Today, we're about to uncover a truly one-of-a-kind artifact from the 16th century that's been puzzling historians, explorers, and map enthusiasts for centuries. Welcome to the world of the Ostrich Egg Globe, an extraordinary map, quite literally crafted from nature's toughest egg. I'm not talking about any ordinary globe. This egg-shaped treasure is older than the country you're probably living in and holds within it a treasure trove of adventure, cartographic errors, and unsolved mysteries. This globe is not just an artifact. It's a time machine that takes us back to the age of exploration, when the Americas were still a blur on the map, and cartographers were taking wild guesses about what the world looked like. Would you believe this globe features the Americas, even before they were fully mapped? It's one of the earliest examples of what we now call worldly ignorance, mixed with a healthy dose of adventure, mistakes, and good old-fashioned guesswork. So buckle in, because we're about to take a wild ride into the world of early mapmaking, exploration, and some hilariously inaccurate geography that will make your modern-day GPS look like a broken compass. Let's dive deep into the Ostrich Egg Globe, a cartographic masterpiece that continues to leave people scratching their heads. Let's kick off with some cartographic marvels, because this Ostrich Egg Globe didn't just survive centuries of wear and tear. It's been through it all, like a cartographer's version of the Titanic. Picture this: 1504, the age of exploration is at its peak, and the world is still as confusing as ever. The Americas were just being explored, and Europe thought they could map the whole world with half the info and a lot of imagination. The creator of this globe clearly wasn't just some average person picking up a hobby. This was someone with a big idea and an even bigger resourcefulness. Why an ostrich egg? Well, why not? There were no plastic globes and probably no Hobby Lobby for fancy materials back then. So they went with what they had: an ostrich egg. Who knew eggshells would become the material of choice for one of the most intriguing and enduring cartographic creations in history? Now, the globe's age and material are fascinating, but what's even more intriguing is its historical context. At the time, maps were far from perfect. Think of them as ancient GPS devices that tried their best, but didn't have Google Maps or satellite data. In fact, maps were filled with incredibly offbeat inaccuracies, like dragons and sea monsters scattered across the unexplored world. And here's the thing, this globe is no different. But that's the charm. These little cartographic errors are the embodiment of the era's bold curiosity and uncharted excitement. What's even more interesting? It's one of the earliest known globes to show the Americas, back when nobody had a clue about the full scope of the continent. This intricate globe wasn't just about geography. It was a symbol of human curiosity, showcasing an early representation of the world, but also the imperfections of those who were venturing into unknown lands. The globe is both a work of art and a reminder of how far we've come in understanding the world. All right, let's talk about craftsmanship. You might think an ostrich egg globe is cool, but how do you actually make a globe out of an egg? Let's break it down. First off, you need patience, precision, and a touch of mad genius. I'm talking about a time when even making a regular globe was a huge task. These cartographers didn't have the benefit of modern tools or a quick trip to the store. So, imagine being a 16th century cartographer, staring at an ostrich egg and thinking, this will make an awesome globe. The egg's tough shell made it perfect for durability, and carving out a precise globe was no easy feat. They would have needed a steady hand, and let's be honest, probably a lot of coffee to get it done. Plus, there was no fancy mapping software back then, just paper, wood, and good old imagination. Once the egg was carefully hollowed out, the map makers would have used engraving tools to painstakingly mark out the continents. Accurately enough, but not perfectly. They weren't trying to draw something that would survive for hundreds of years. They were just making a representation of the world based on what was known at the time. And let me tell you, it's beautifully imperfect. The whole process would have taken weeks, maybe months to craft. This globe was a work of art in itself, a product of its time when materials and methods were far from ideal. One thing is clear: whoever made this globe was a genius and a visionary. Imagine the excitement they must have felt as they added the Americas to the globe for the very first time. Sure, they probably made some mistakes here and there, but that's what makes it so special. It's a snapshot of an evolving world. Now let's take a detour into the land of myth and mystery. You've probably seen the phrase, "Here be dragons," on old maps and thought, that's a nice fairy tale. But what if I told you it was serious business back then? The phrase on the Ostrich Egg Globe, hexant draconess, points directly to the wild unknown areas on the map. It's like the early explorers' version of saying, there might be dragons out here. Watch out! The "here be dragons" phrase wasn't just about being dramatic. In those days, cartographers had no Google Maps, no satellites, and no highways to follow. So, when they didn't know what was beyond a certain point, they would add dragons. Why? Because why not? The idea that dragons might exist in unexplored territories fueled the imagination of explorers. Plus, it was probably much easier to mark an area with "here be dragons" than admit that, oops, we just didn't know what was out there. What if those dragons weren't just fictional creatures? Well, one theory suggests the Komodo dragon, a real, dangerous reptile, might have been a part of this legend. You've got explorers hearing rumours, seeing strange creatures, and throwing dragons into the mix to spice up their maps. It's a perfect mix of reality, myth, and a little bit of, let's make it interesting, to keep people intrigued. And now for the mountains of Kong? No, we're not talking about King Kong's favourite vacation spot. These mountains were non-existent, and yet they graced maps for over 100 years. Think about it. Early cartographers were so eager to fill in the blank spaces on the world map that they would sometimes invent entire mountain ranges out of thin air. The mountains of Kong are prime real estate for map-making fiction. They appeared on maps of Africa starting in the early 19th century, after an explorer's vague report was misinterpreted. The explorer Mungo Park had ventured through West Africa, but his findings were murky at best. So, guess what? The mountains were invented, and for decades, these imaginary peaks were mapped as fact. Some map makers were so convinced these mountains were real that they literally made the mountains of Kong a landmark for years. They became part of the map. For decades, no one questioned their existence. Can you imagine? In the 19th century, explorers and map makers were still adding fictional stuff to their maps. Some even used old myths to draw the borders of the known world. And the mountains of Kong were one of the greatest blunders. It wasn't until 1920 that it was finally disproven that they didn't even exist. Can you imagine getting your map checked and realizing you've been copying a fictional mountain range for 100 years? Flash forward to today and you'd think cartographers would have everything figured out. But guess what? Mapping is still a huge challenge. Urbanization, deforestation, and climate change are reshaping landscapes so fast that even satellite images can't keep up. There's still so much of the world we can't map accurately. Think about the Vale do Javari in Brazil, which is home to uncontacted tribes. It's a part of the world that's never been mapped accurately because it's just too remote. And not just that, it's illegal to map certain places due to indigenous rights. So mapping that territory, not happening. And then there's the ocean floor. Did you know the ocean is still largely unmapped? Yes, we've only mapped about 20% of it, and the rest is like exploring another planet. Between climate change and natural disasters, we've got a moving target, and it's still hard to keep up. The term Mount Weasel refers to a clever and humorous tactic used in copyright protection, originating from a fictional entry in an encyclopedia. This whimsical term describes a fictitious creature inserted into reference works to serve as a copyright trap. The concept emerged from a satirical commentary on the absurdity of some copyright practices, particularly in encyclopedias and maps, where such entries are designed to catch unauthorized reproductions. The idea is that if someone were to copy the encyclopedia and include the entry about the Mount Weasel, the original publisher could claim copyright infringement, as the creature does not exist in reality. This practice highlights the lengths to which publishers go to protect their intellectual property, often resulting in entries that are both amusing and perplexing. The absurdity of Mount Weasels and similar copyright traps reflects the broader challenges of intellectual property in the publishing industry, where the ease of reproduction in the digital age has made it increasingly difficult to safeguard original content. Publishers must navigate a landscape where unauthorized copying can occur with minimal effort, leading to innovative yet sometimes ridiculous methods of protection. These practices underscore the tension between the desire to share knowledge and the need to protect the rights of creators. So, how do mapmakers protect their hard work in a world where anyone can steal their designs? Easy. They insert fake streets, towns, and even whole cities into their maps as copyright traps. The idea? Well, let's say you mapmaker create a whole city called a glow, and someone takes your map and copies it without permission. You catch them red-handed and boom, lawsuit. You've got proof they've stolen your work. It's like an Easter egg for mapmakers, except this one leads to a legal victory. It's funny, right? Well, in the UK, it's called a trap street, and it's a whole thing to catch copycats. I mean, think about it. If you're a mapmaker, you've got to stay one step ahead of the game. Who knew being a mapmaker meant playing detective at the same time? So, now that we've had our share of dragons, mountains, and copyright battles, what did we learn? Early maps weren't just about directions. They were a reflection of adventure, guesswork, and sometimes a little cartographic comedy. Maps, like this Ostrich Egg Globe, continue to fascinate and remind us how much we still have to learn about our world. If you love this deep dive into the strange world of maps, myths, and modern mysteries, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with fellow explorers and history buffs. We'll continue uncovering the hidden stories of our world through the lens of cartography, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Happy exploring, and I'll see you in the next adventure.